Have you ever paused for a moment and asked yourself whether all the friendships you chase might actually be weighing you down instead of lifting you up? Society typically insists that a man's worth is measured by the number of friends he has, or by the flood of likes and follows he can collect. But what if that's never been the real key to confidence and success? What if, instead, your true power and unshakable sense of self come from something far deeper and far quieter? Something that has nothing to do with crowds, popularity, or external validation. It can feel unsettling to ask these questions, especially when the world around us is always nudging us to branch out, make small talk, and collect connections like trophies. Yet there's a distinct possibility that in all this hurry to be perpetually social, we've overlooked the potent strength that emerges from moments of solitude and introspection. It's entirely possible that the popular notion of you can't ever be alone is steering us away from a more profound, enduring form of inner confidence. And that's precisely what we're going to explore here. Why having few or no friends can turn into a bedrock of security, and how solitude, rather than being a curse, can be a catalyst for the kind of personal growth that most people spend their lives chasing. To peel back the layers, consider the common scenario of walking into a crowded room. People are talking over one another. Jokes are flying, and you can sense the buzz of excitement in the air. You might see large groups forming in corners, people greeting each other with huge smiles, or perhaps snapping pictures that will later be shared on social media. It's easy to look at these gatherings and assume this is what confidence looks like. Lots of people, lots of noise, lots of friendly banter. But behind these social veneers often lurks a desperate need for outside approval. Everyone can appear to be having the time of their lives while silently wondering what others think of them, double-checking their phones for notifications, or feeling that if they don't keep up the right image, they'll be cast aside. We're told from childhood that being popular is a path to joy and success, and so we try to align ourselves with that blueprint. Like fish that don't realize they're in water, we rarely stop to ask whether this popularity-based formula actually leads to genuine fulfillment. Could it be possible that we keep pushing ourselves into large social circles, not because we truly want them, but because we fear not having them? Such a fear can lead us to chase approval in ways that are downright exhausting. When we find ourselves constantly trying to please others, we enter a never-ending cycle. We portray whatever image we think the crowd wants to see, measure our self-esteem by whether people approve through compliments or likes, and fall into despair when a single negative comment erodes our carefully curated self-image. It's like being on a treadmill set to an uncomfortably fast pace. We're expending all this energy, but rarely stepping back to see if we're actually going anywhere meaningful. Over time, it wears us down. We find ourselves increasingly paranoid about how we appear, how many friends we have, or how many new connections we can cultivate. We turn to social media, hoping to collect new followers or snag a certain number of likes, only to realize that the validation we receive is fleeting, a tiny dopamine hit that dissolves within hours, leaving us hungry for more. A growing body of research confirms that people often spend multiple hours a day checking social platforms for reinforcement, yet this constant seeking rarely translates into lasting self-confidence. It ends up intensifying the feeling of emptiness, because no matter how many times you refresh your feed, there's always a possibility of someone else receiving more attention or more praise. But let's entertain a bold notion. Real security and confidence might not be found in the size of our friend list at all. Instead, it could lie within that still, silent understanding of who we are when nobody else is watching. Imagine for a moment a sense of self so robust that it doesn't crumble when someone unfollows you or voices a criticism in front of a room full of people. Envision a version of you that feels inherently worthy, not because you're told you're worthy, but because you recognize your own intrinsic value. That kind of confidence arises from a place that external factors can't penetrate. It's the result of investing time in solitude and reflection, in grappling with your own mind and heart without leaning on another person's approval. If you cultivate that self-knowledge, you begin to see that nothing outside of you, no wave of compliments, no cascade of likes, can grant you a sense of worth that's deeper or more permanent than what you discover within. The question then becomes, how do we get there? How do we travel from always seeking to be included, always yearning for social applause, to this more solid and unshakable foundation? The answer, in a word, is solitude. Though the very idea of being alone can trigger anxieties in many of us, solitude is frequently misunderstood. There's a massive difference between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness, as it's often experienced, involves feeling alienated and disconnected from others, a sensation that can occur even in a crowded room. Solitude, on the other hand, is a deliberate choice to be with yourself for a time, not as a punishment, but as a gift of space and calm. History is chock full of examples of how solitude has been leveraged by visionaries, saints, inventors, and artists to tap into a wellspring of creativity and clarity. From Henry David Thoreau retreating to Walden Pond to the desert fathers of early Christianity who sought spiritual depth in isolation, there's ample precedent for how stepping away from the crowd fosters breakthroughs. But you don't have to be a famed writer or an ascetic monk to appreciate the boon of simply sitting quietly with your own thoughts. It's in those moments, undistracted by the noise of everyday life, that you learn what truly matters to you, what you believe, and where your strengths or weaknesses lie. It can be uncomfortable at first because solitude forces us to confront the parts of ourselves we might normally hide behind social activity. All those insecurities or unresolved anxieties can emerge when you're alone. Without the buffer of conversation or the reward of someone else's reassurance, you have to face your inner tensions head-on. But through that direct confrontation, growth happens. By learning how to acknowledge and even befriend your own doubts, you develop a sturdiness that isn't so easily shaken. It's a bit like forging steel. Subjected to the intense heat of honest self-reflection, you come out stronger, more resilient, and less reliant on others to prop you up. This process can lead to an almost unflappable equilibrium, where criticism doesn't rock you and applause doesn't inflate you. You become steady because you've done the work to know and accept yourself in the silence. This doesn't mean we should renounce all human connection. Far from it. Human beings are, by nature, social creatures who benefit from meaningful relationships. What it does mean is that we can start to distinguish between healthy, genuine bonds and the superficial social collecting that often poses as friendship. In a quest to measure our worth, we can easily slide into the habit of counting acquaintances. But as the old saying goes, it's better to have 4 quarters than 100 pennies. Quality, genuine bonds, where you feel truly known and accepted, have a much more positive effect on your well-being than an ocean of acquaintances who barely recognize your true self. After all, it only takes 1 or 2 trusted allies to stand by you when life gets turbulent. Large circles can dissolve in a blink when the going gets tough. If you have cultivated a deep bond with just a few people, that is a source of support that speaks volumes about your life's quality. And when you're not scouring the horizon for social validation, you grant yourself the freedom to connect with others in a way that's more honest, more respectful, and more aligned with your actual values. That brings us to the notion of quality over quantity. We live in a world that often equates success with being recognized or liked by a broad swath of people. Social media is partially to blame for this since it thrives on metrics. How many followers, how many likes, how many comments. The hidden assumption is that if those numbers are high, you're doing something right, you're relevant, you're winning. But real-life relationships don't always translate to those vanity metrics, and chasing them can leave us feeling hollow. Imagine 2 different scenarios. In one, someone has 1,000 friends on social media, yet none of these individuals truly know his heart. They may react to a post with a thumbs up or heart emoji, but when he's dealing with inner turmoil, there's no one to call. In the second scenario, another individual might have only 3 or 4 very close friends, but those friends are the kind who understand his soul, support him during crises, and celebrate his genuine achievements. Who, in the end, is more successful in the deeper sense of the word? By focusing on a smaller circle, you also protect your energy, your time, and your sense of self. Maintaining a massive social network can sometimes feel like spinning dozens of plates in the air. You have to constantly check in, keep up appearances, remember birthdays, comment on posts, show up at events, and filter your opinions to avoid conflict. When your circle is intentionally tight, you can devote meaningful attention to those few genuine connections. This allows you to listen more deeply, to share more authentically, and to invest in nurturing those friendships without spreading yourself too thin. Furthermore, a small circle can help you remain anchored to your personal values because you surround yourself with people who share or respect those core principles. This environment becomes a greenhouse for personal development. Honest feedback, mutual support, and open celebration of each other's growth. For many, that's a far cry from scrolling through a highlight reel of curated photos and wondering if you measure up. Consider, too, that forging a smaller circle requires an element of self-trust. You're no longer relying on numbers to validate your identity. Instead, You're leaning into your instincts about who is worthy of your energy and time. You're learning to sense whether a relationship is reciprocal, genuine, and constructive rather than constantly having to weigh if it'll help you fit into some popular crowd. This selective process can feel awkward in a society that tells us we must be on and ready to mingle at all times, but it's an act of self-respect. It's effectively saying, my sense of self is too valuable to be tossed in a sea of casual contacts. This, in turn, builds that quiet, grounded confidence, the kind that doesn't waver just because a certain acquaintance has faded away. All of this, of course, clashes with a world that glamorizes large gatherings, multiple social commitments, and endless networking. Society has hammered into our heads the idea that to be winning at life, you should never eat alone, never travel alone, never think alone. And so, many people view solitude as a symptom of failure, a sign that you couldn't manage to gather around you a big and bustling circle of admirers. Yet if we listen to the voices of philosophers, monks, artists, innovators, and everyday individuals who have discovered the power of time spent alone, we realize that the constant pressure to be socially integrated is actually quite limiting. It narrows our focus to external metrics of success. How many people greet us by name? How many invites fill our calendar? Rather than encouraging us to explore inner depth. To choose a path of more conscious solitude is to subtly rebel against this narrative, to say, I am worth the time it takes to get to know myself without distraction. Of course, pushing back against such a societal current can be challenging. You might get questions like, are you okay? Is something wrong when you opt out of social engagements? You might feel the tug of insecurity as you scroll your feed and see big groups posted up in nightclubs or at group vacations. But here's the reality check. Not every boisterous night out equates to closeness or significance. Often, in the noise, it's easy to lose your own voice. By stepping aside and prioritizing quality, introspection, and authenticity, you give yourself the space to see the bigger picture. You also allow yourself to realize that your tastes and desires might not align with the crowds at all. Perhaps you thrive in quieter, more thoughtful settings, or find gratification in solitary pursuits like reading, painting, writing, or meditative walks. Solitude can help you recalibrate your life so that it reflects your genuine likes and passions, rather than those the crowd might impose on you. Maintaining your individuality requires ongoing attentiveness. That's where setting boundaries comes in. Society, friends, and even family might not initially understand your choice to limit your social circle or to spend a chunk of your time alone. They might pressure you to come out more or insist that you need to have a wide network. But you are your own best advocate. Getting clear about what you truly value, what goals you have, and how you want to spend your precious hours on Earth keeps you from becoming a passive pawn in someone else's version of success. This clarity is an anchor in turbulent waters. It prevents you from drifting into social obligations that rob you of peace and hamper your growth. By practicing thoughtful yes and unashamed no's, you earn a form of freedom that is both rare and transformative. In that freedom, you discover the priceless gift of moving through life under your own guidance, not because you're seeking external validation, but because you trust your inner compass. Stepping off the social treadmill doesn't mean you'll never feel lonely or uncertain. Humans are complex, and it's natural to crave connection. But there's a subtle distinction between longing for genuine closeness with a few kindred spirits and craving constant superficial contact that doesn't really feed your soul. The more you embrace solitude, the more you learn to tell the difference. You begin to value those nights when you can curl up with a good book or simply reflect on the direction of your life. You start to see that these hours are not wasted or sad, but instead serve as golden opportunities for revelation. Perhaps you begin to notice patterns in your behavior, or you recall childhood dreams that you abandoned in the rush to conform. Solitude is a place where neglected parts of your identity can resurface, reminding you of your original passions and core truths. That newfound self-awareness then translates into a deeper sense of certainty when you do interact with the world. You have a stronger point of view, and you're less likely to be rattled by people who disagree or by fleeting trends that come and go. As you become more discerning about how you spend your time and with whom, your smaller circle of friends can actually become an even richer source of support. The people who stick around, the ones who don't guilt you for occasionally choosing alone time, tend to be those who genuinely care about your well-being and respect your journey. They understand you enough to know that sometimes you need space to recharge, and their acceptance of this makes your bond stronger. In turn, You learn to reciprocate that understanding by honoring their needs, their boundaries, and their personal growth. This mutual respect transforms relationships from mere acquaintanceships into something more akin to an alliance, where each person's authenticity is celebrated. It's not uncommon for individuals who practice solitude to report that their social interactions, though fewer in number, become deeper and more satisfying because they're fueled by genuine desire to connect, not by social obligation or empty attempts at validation. But let's circle back to the big question that might still be nagging at you. Is it possible to strike a balance between embracing solitude and maintaining some level of social interaction? Absolutely. The goal here is never to isolate yourself entirely from humanity. Rather, it's to discover a sweet spot where solitude is integrated into your life so that you can leverage its power to grow, to reflect, and to center yourself. When you do choose to socialize, you'll find that you're more present and more secure. Why? Because you're no longer seeking approval. You're there out of genuine interest in sharing moments with others. You're comfortable in your own skin, so you're not scanning the environment for signs that you belong. This relaxed authenticity usually invites even richer social experiences. In an ironic twist, stepping away from the crowd for the sake of solitude might actually enhance your ability to connect meaningfully when you step back in. Now, this perspective can be particularly striking for men, given that society often tells them they must have a robust group of buddies to validate their masculinity or success. There's a common stereotype that a real man is always out and about, always part of a circle, always being high-fived by a gaggle of friends at the bar or at the game. Yet there's something quietly powerful about the man who knows how to stand on his own. Rather than measuring himself by how many people are around him, he measures himself by his alignment with his own principles. This self-contained strength is the essence of being secure. It's reminiscent of the biblical idea that you can stand firm in your faith or principles even if it means you're not surrounded by a crowd. And in a more modern sense, it resonates with any philosophy, Stoic, Buddhist, or otherwise, that applauds self-mastery and internal resilience over external fanfare. By leaning into solitude, a man discovers a route to self-awareness that can't be so easily shaken by social fluctuations. It's crucial to emphasize that this doesn't mean arrogance or detachment from the rest of humanity. In fact, the more you understand yourself, the more compassion and patience you can develop for others. Because you're not rushing around trying to gather superficial friendships, you can be more attentive and empathetic to the handful of people who matter to you. You can afford to invest in those relationships, to listen without an agenda, to love without requiring anything in return. That emotional generosity stems from feeling abundant within yourself, rather than seeking to fill an internal void with endless external contact. In this way, solitude indirectly contributes to healthier, more mature, and more nurturing connections. Sometimes we worry about how we'll be perceived by the broader public if we opt for a quieter life. Will people see us as loners, recluses, or antisocial? Possibly, but here's a liberating secret. People will think what they want to think, regardless of your best attempts to control their perception. You might attend every party and shake every hand, and you'd still find someone who criticizes you for not being social enough or for being too social in the wrong circles. Once you grasp this reality, that external approval is largely uncontrollable. You're free to steer your life according to your own internal values rather than bending to someone else's. Certainly, societal expectations can be loud and insistent, but your personal fulfillment should take precedence. After all, at the end of the day, you live with yourself. Only you know whether you're spending your time in ways that align with your core beliefs and aspirations. On the practical side of things, weathering external pressures also means learning to communicate your needs calmly and confidently. For instance, if you decide you need a weekend to yourself, you can let friends or family know, "I appreciate the invitation, but I'm going to use this time to rest and recharge." You don't owe them an elaborate explanation. By asserting your boundaries kindly but firmly, you're reminding yourself and others that your well-being matters. Over time, people often come to respect these boundaries, and your example can encourage them to also question the non-stop social grind. You would be surprised at how many people secretly crave more solitude, but feel guilty about seeking it. Another angle to consider is that solitude can enhance your creativity and problem-solving abilities. Whether you're dealing with personal challenges or professional projects, stepping away from the constant hum of social input can clear the mental clutter and pave the way for deeper insight. Many spiritual traditions recognize the value of retreat. Taking time away from everyday routines to reflect, pray, meditate, or simply be alone with one's thoughts. These practices often yield insights that remain out of reach amid the stress and busyness of daily life. Therefore, while society might accuse you of doing nothing when you choose solitude, you might actually be doing some of the most important inner work that pays dividends in terms of clarity, innovation, and emotional balance. For those who maintain a spiritual perspective, solitude can also serve as a sacred meeting place between you and the divine. Whether you conceptualize the divine as God, a higher power, or simply the deeper wellspring of being within yourself. In many biblical narratives, significant revelations and callings happen when individuals are alone. Moses on the mountain, Jesus in the wilderness, prophets hearing still, small voices. Although you might not have a literal mountain or desert to retreat to, you can carve out your own sanctuary in your home or a natural spot nearby. In that space of silence, profound transformations can occur. Even if you're not religious, the principle still applies. Solitude can help you connect to a sense of something bigger than yourself or reveal the shared humanity that binds all of us at a fundamental level. Paradoxically, spending time alone can help you see how interconnected we truly are, simply by letting you step out of the swirling chaos of social assumptions. As time goes on, you might notice that your confidence is increasingly grounded in self-knowledge rather than the external fireworks of social life. Moments that once triggered your insecurities, like being left out of a group outing, start to lose their sting. You understand that your worth wasn't hinged on that invitation, and you can still have a richly rewarding day cultivating your own interests or reflecting on your goals. If others ask why you didn't come, you can straightforwardly say you were taking personal time, and that's that. The more you exercise the self-possession, the more people recognize you as someone who knows his own mind, someone who cannot be coerced by peer pressure, and that, ironically, often attracts a different kind of respect. People begin to see you as an individual who stands for something, who is not swayed by the fleeting trends that dominate daily chatter. Meanwhile, as you continue to be selective about the people in your life, you'll see that your conversations with them hold more depth. You can share dreams, fears, humor, and insights on a level that far surpasses small talk. In such an environment, criticism, even if harsh, can come from a place of care aimed at helping you grow rather than tearing you down. Likewise, your successes are met with real celebration, not half-hearted applause motivated by jealousy or obligation. These are the friendships that reflect back to you your own intrinsic worth, reinforcing the self-belief you've been cultivating in solitude. And when challenges arise, perhaps a setback in your career or a personal crisis, you'll find this circle invaluable because it's built on substance, not on precarious social rituals. All of these outcomes reinforce the original message. Fewer, more meaningful connections can lead to greater peace, authenticity, and inner strength. The illusions of social validation, whether online or off, start to dissolve when you spend time understanding your own psyche, grappling with your aspirations, and learning to be okay with quiet. You become less reactive, less vulnerable to the opinions of others, and more aligned with your own North Star. The time you spend alone is no longer tinged with the dread of, I'm missing out. Instead, it's filled with curiosity about what you might discover or create in the stillness. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, of course. The human ego is persistent, and societal messages are loud. There will be days when you wonder if you're doing the right thing by declining another group invitation or by disengaging from social media for a while. Those are precisely the moments when it helps to remember why you started this journey in the first place. You began it because you wanted a kind of confidence that wouldn't crumble at the slightest whisper of disapproval. You wanted to break free from the endless chase for outside validation and find that unwavering sense of who you are and why you matter. Each stretch of alone time becomes an investment in your sovereignty, your right and responsibility to chart the course of your own life. Gradually, you'll likely find yourself in situations where you stand out precisely because you aren't trying to fit in. Maybe you attend a networking event, but don't cling to the necessity of meeting everyone in the room. Instead, you have one or two meaningful conversations and leave when you feel it's time. Or you might notice that certain relationships you once clung to fall away naturally because they were built on mutual insecurity rather than genuine connection. Though it can be sad to see them go, you realize you're making room for something more real. This process, while sometimes uncomfortable, is a hallmark of personal evolution. It's the pruning away of what no longer serves you so that healthier growth can take place. If at any point you feel isolated or uncertain, you can remind yourself that solitude is a phase of exploration, not a permanent exile. You retain full agency to reconnect whenever you wish, but you do so on your own terms. Over time, that agency itself becomes a cornerstone of confidence. You know you can choose when and how to engage with others, and you trust that your worth is never in question, whether you're in a crowd or by yourself. That's a far cry from someone who says yes to every plan out of fear of missing out or from an inner anxiety that, without constant companionship, he has no value. Standing alone out of strength is not the same as standing alone out of fear or social deficiency. In fact, it can be one of the most empowering acts of self-affirmation you'll ever undertake. At the end of this path of reflection, what stands out is that an unshakable man or woman, for that matter, is not defined by the number of friends they have or the volume of cheers in the background. Rather, it's defined by how securely they stand in their own sense of identity and purpose. This kind of individual can navigate ups and downs with composure. When life storms roll in, they don't go scrambling for outside approval. Instead, they anchor themselves in the personal truth they've discovered during hours of solitude. Critics may come, praises may come, but neither drastically rocks their foundation. And ironically, this level of self-possession can often draw others in more than frenzied socializing ever could, because authenticity is quietly magnetic in a world addicted to pretense. That is what solitude offers, the space in which you become intimately acquainted with the deeper currents of your own mind and spirit. If that involves confronting old wounds or addressing patterns you've ignored, so be it. Ultimately, that confrontation is where freedom lives. By dealing with your insecurities in private reflection, rather than desperately trying to drown them out in the crowd, you develop a resilience that can't be replicated by external fanfare. This is your invitation to see solitude not as a sentence, but as a privilege, a workshop where you shape yourself into a person who no longer runs from silence but welcomes it. In that welcoming, you discover something invaluable, the calm assurance that you are enough regardless of how many people stand beside you. In the end, you may still choose to have friends, perhaps even more than a few, but the difference is that you no longer measure yourself by how many text messages you have waiting or how crowded your birthday party is. You appreciate friendship for what it is, a sincere connection that enhances your life, not a scoreboard. And when you do form these connections, they're more likely to be built on shared values, mutual respect, and genuine care, rather than the rush frenzy to simply have more people in your orbit. This authenticity fosters relationships that stand the test of time and hardship, rather than evaporating at the first sign of tension. The reward is rich, a life more aligned, less anxious, more fulfilled, and more grounded in a sense of who you are at your core. If you've reached this point with a sense of resonance or inspiration, reflect on what small steps you can take to embrace solitude in your own life. It might be a quiet morning routine, a weekend spent offline, or a hike by yourself where you let your thoughts run free. Notice how you feel afterward. The clarity, the sense of possibility, the relief from the noise. And next time you're invited somewhere, make your decision based on genuine interest, not on the fear that you should show up. In each of these small choices, you're reclaiming your power from the grip of external validation. Little by little, you'll see that it's in those quiet corners, when you're alone and free to just be, that a remarkable transformation takes place. You'll laugh at how society insists you need countless friends when you find that the greatest friend you needed was the person you meet in solitude, yourself. From there, the courage to face the world with open arms and an untroubled heart naturally grows. Far from making you cold or withdrawn, your time alone can foster a deeper capacity for empathy and understanding. Because when you aren't burdened by the need to earn acceptance, you can genuinely tune into others, celebrate their successes, and offer a compassionate ear to their troubles. You do so not to gain favors or to posture for approval, but simply because you're centered in your own well of self-worth. This interplay, where solitude strengthens your ability to connect meaningfully, becomes one of life's most uplifting paradoxes. You become living proof that you don't have to stand in a big crowd to be a bright light. Sometimes the light shines brightest in the darkness of solitude. So take this as both an affirmation and a gentle challenge. Dare to step away from the illusions of popularity as the ultimate measure of success. Dare to preserve a space in your life for quiet introspection, where you can listen to your own inner voice above the clamor of the crowd. Dare to trust that your security is not contingent on the numbers around you, but on the intangible qualities within you, your principles, your integrity, your compassion, and your clarity of purpose. If you do, you'll find that the solitude you once feared can become a refuge of self-discovery and the seedbed of an unshakable confidence. And along the way, you might just find a few true friends who resonate deeply with the real you, creating bonds that are profoundly rewarding and lasting. Keep in mind that this is an ever-evolving process. You might ebb and flow between periods of greater solitude and periods of increased social engagement, depending on life's demands and your personal growth. There's no fixed formula for how many friends you should have or how many hours a week you should spend alone. What's important is the sincerity of your choices and the authenticity they nurture within you. As you refine your inner compass, you become increasingly adept at recognizing when socializing is nourishing and when it's a distraction. And that recognition is a hallmark of a person who genuinely knows themselves and acts from a place of intention. If any part of your heart is whispering that you're overdue for some quiet reflection, consider this your sign to follow that call. With practice, what once felt like discomfort transforms into delight. Maybe you'll find yourself relishing small routines, sipping coffee in silence before dawn, walking along a quiet path, or journaling about your insights. These moments will become treasured interludes in your daily rhythm, windows where your mind can breathe and your spirit can settle. Gradually, you'll notice that this habit of introspection helps you develop solutions to life's problems more effectively. You'll sense an intangible but undeniable strengthening of your core, where you trust yourself enough to decide which way to go, rather than surveying everyone else for their approval. And that's where you unlock your greatest resource, self-reliance. So, I invite you to test this wisdom in your own life. Instead of just reading about it, embrace a weekend of solitude. Turn off the nonstop flow of messages and notifications and see what surfaces. You might uncover memories and ideas you've neglected, or you might simply realize how much mental energy goes into daily social maintenance. Then, when you reemerge into social spaces, notice whether you carry yourself differently. Notice if you feel calmer, less reactive, more open to honest exchanges, and less fearful of missing out. The personal experimentation is what cements these principles and shows you that true security, true confidence isn't fragile. It isn't dependent on a phone buzzing with messages. It rests in the quiet conviction you've built from within. In closing, remember that society's narrative isn't always right. We've been told for so long that success means surrounding yourself with an ever-growing crowd, but sometimes the crowd can distract you from the most meaningful parts of your existence. Give yourself permission to sift through the noise, to prune your social vines, and to discover the hidden fruit of being alone. In those solitary moments, you reclaim your time, your mental clarity, and your creative potential. You cultivate relationships that aren't just numerous, but nurturing and solid. You develop a self-assurance that doesn't waver with each passing breeze of opinion. You anchor yourself in the knowledge that you are enough, precisely as you are, and that your worth cannot be measured in likes, follows, or the size of your friend group. If this resonates with you, then you're already on the path to becoming the most grounded version of yourself. A version that understands how solitude can be a teacher, a haven, and a wellspring of wisdom. It's a path that leads to a different kind of fulfillment, one that outlasts fleeting trends and superficial nods of approval. You don't have to give up on camaraderie or community. You only need to ensure that when you do connect, it's on terms that respect your individuality and genuinely enhance your life. That shift in perspective can open doors you never knew existed, doors that lead to a quieter, yet far more exhilarating sense of personal freedom. Thank you for journeying through these reflections. I hope they spark in you a curiosity to explore the transformative power of solitude, to resist the treadmill of constant social validation, and to find the kind of unshakable security that comes only from knowing yourself. If you found value in these words and want to dig deeper into how solitude, small circles, and inner strength can reshape your life, make sure to stay tuned for more explorations on the subject. There's always another layer to uncover, another facet to polish as you move toward a life defined less by the clamor of popular opinion and more by the steady drumbeat of your own heart. And with that, I'll leave you to consider how you might integrate solitude into your routines, to question whether the swirl of social approval is truly serving you, and to envision how your confidence might flourish when it's rooted in something more lasting than the latest fad. Even if you start with just a few minutes of quiet each day, you may discover that those minutes have a ripple effect, gradually increasing your capacity for honest self-examination and ultimately for unwavering peace. Embrace it as a chance to become comfortable in your own skin, to stand tall not because others applaud, but because you've learned to applaud yourself. After all, real growth is an inside job, and solitude is one of your most potent allies on that inward path. If all of this sparks your interest and you're eager for more insights, don't stop now. There's so much more to learn and explore about deepening your self-understanding, building true resilience, and finding your unique way in a noisy world. I can promise that as you continue along this road, you'll uncover dimensions of yourself that you never suspected were there, layers of hidden strength that become active only when you allow space for quiet reflection. Let this be a stepping stone, not the end of your journey. Begin to live it, to test it, to make it yours, and watch how your life transforms in both subtle and profound ways. If you've come this far, you're likely ready to move beyond merely reading and into the realm of practical application. So, consider this your gentle nudge to take action. Carve out that sacred time for yourself. Release the fear of missing out and trust that the best revelations come when the world falls silent. It might just turn out to be the most beneficial investment of time you ever make. And don't let anyone convince you that a solitary moment is a wasted moment. It can be the moment where everything finally clicks, where hidden aspirations and dormant strengths begin to bloom. I'm grateful you joined me in dissecting these ideas about solitude, the illusions of social validation, and the real meaning of success in our modern age. As we wrap up, hold on to the key insight. You are the ultimate source of your self-worth, and sometimes you have to stand alone to truly realize it. To let yourself discover that is to step into a new realm of confidence, a realm where the noise of the crowd becomes optional background music and your inner voice carries the melody. If you're intrigued by the promise of greater inner security and want to see how this perspective can further illuminate your life's path, you won't want to miss what we'll discuss next. There's always more to uncover about becoming the best version of yourself, and I can't wait to continue the conversation. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next video.